So this 12TB external hard disk drive is jam-packed, full of 86,000 retro games, making it pretty much the ultimate emulation accessory for the Ally and indeed all PC gaming handhelds like the Legion Go 2. Let's go through the 5 key areas of this accessory to answer the ton of questions I had going into this, including does it work off the Ally's power, how easy was it to set up, does it use the Ally's onboard controls, which of the 6 front-end interfaces are the best, and finally which games from lower and higher emulation systems are included and how well they run on this. Plus I'll share my top 8 tips when using this, including the question I get asked the most, the 3 types of gamers who would really benefit from this, and whether you should get one too. So for area 1, let's see what we get in the box. And on the Ally Express website, there are 2 packages. The first is this 12TB hard drive, a user manual, USB data cable and power supply. And the second package is $20 more and is exactly the same, plus we get a gamepad too. So Kinhank, the company, very kindly sent me this second package to test out. So here is the Game Sir T3 wireless game controller, and first impressions when unboxing and having some hands-on time is that it's a pretty well built controller in the style of a PS5 DualSense, with symmetrical thumbsticks that have a very nice resistance to them, all triggers at the top feel good. And if you dock your Ally and use an external monitor instead of using the onboard Ally controls, or indeed use this with your home PC setup, then this is easily worth the $20 more. Next, we have a UK plug socket converter if you're ordering here to the UK, and I'm kind of curious to see if we still need to plug in the disk drive to a plug socket, or will it run solely off the Ally? Then is this well protected package with a message that states before using the hard disk that we need to install the operating environment required for the game front end, otherwise games will not run. So again, I'm curious how pick up and play this thing is. But yes, we have here a good quality Western Digital 12TB hard disk drive. And the final package is the external disk drive enclosure by Ugreen. And first impressions unboxing this is I love this beautiful matte black casing that feels very sturdy to protect our 12TB disk drive. We get a power cable, some instructions, but these are for the Ugreen enclosure and not for the actual setting up. So we'll see how easy that is in a moment. And finally, the USB cable. Key area 2 is how easy is this thing to set up? Well, let's slide off the top of the enclosure, make sure that we align the disk drive correctly to the bottom of the casing like this, simply slide it in gently.
That's what she said!
Michael, please.
There he is.
Please.
Mwah! There he is.
Peel off the protective strip and slide back on the top of the casing. As I say, I'm really impressed with how good this looks. Let's pop in the USB cable to the casing. I'm going to leave off the power cable for the time being to see if the Ally powers it all by itself. Obviously we need to be in Windows for this. I have done a vid on a specific Steam Deck emulation accessory link below, and of course the USB-A cable won't fit into the USB-C input of the Ally. So I'm going to plug it into a USB dongle and then place this into the USB-C port on the Ally. So let's press the power on button and see if it runs off the Ally's power, and nope, the power light is not on. So it does mean that indeed we do need to plug this into a power socket to use it. It cannot be run solely off the Ally. So I've attached my plug converter to use here in the UK and I'll plug this in. Let's press the power button and yes, we now do have the power light. And this Super Game folder pops up automatically. If we click on the installation folder, there are the front end installers here if we need them. I'm going to see what works without installing these first. And the Help FAQs folder, there's a folder called Windows Install Files, which we only need if we're going to play the PC games included on this, which I'm not, and I'll explain why in a moment. So all I'm going to do is open the main core Type R folder, then the core application file, and we're now into this gorgeous looking main menu with our 6 front ends, which are Hyperspin Attraction, Techno Parrot, Kodi, Launchbox, Playnite, and RetroBat. The Ally's onboard controls are working fine without any configuring so far, which is very promising. And we can press the B button, then go into settings and change stuff here, but I think it's great as it is, so I'm going to leave it. So for key area 3, I'll now count down and rank the 6 front-end interfaces we use to navigate through our games, starting with the least to my most favourite one. At 6 on my least favourite is Playnite, purely because here is almost 50 PC games, and I'm just not a fan of including this stuff when we can purchase them through the Steam store and support our amazing developers. Now maybe they have been licensed to use and the developers do earn royalties perhaps, but I'm not going to be playing these just to be on the safe side, and I really do wish that this space could have been used for more Xbox 360 or PS2 games for example. At 5 is Kodi, and this is another front end I won't be using as it's purely a media player with nothing in here currently, although we can add our own movies, TV shows and music if we do want to. At 4 is Big Box, and while it is a nice game launcher, what I've picked for number 1 is vastly superior, so I don't really feel this was all that necessary to include in this package, and again I won't be using this. We're in our top 3 front ends, and at 3 is Techno Parrot, which is for modern arcade games. So for example in the Namco section we have racing games in the Midnight Maximum Tune series. Front end 2 is Hyperspin Attraction, this is for retro arcade games. And I believe that this is what the first version of this emulation accessory shipped with. And here we just have an insane number of old school arcade games like Batman, Atari classics, super old stuff like Ball and Paddle, Capcom arcade games, a series of games like Golden Axe, over 11,000 arcade games under the Multiple Arcade Machine Emulator or MAME for short section, Midway, Nintendo Game & Watch with those old physical handheld designs, and so much more. I do have to try the Outrun section, and yes, the left stick to control and the right trigger for acceleration all works perfectly, with no configuration needed thankfully. Outrun was one of the very first games I ever played as a young kid that made me fall in love with video games, and playing this just brings back so much nostalgia. This is so awesome. And finally, the number 1 front end is RetroBat. This is what I'll be using like 90% of the time to play retro games when I'm not playing arcade games in Techno Parrot or Hyperspin Attraction. This is based on Emulation Station, which is what our beloved EmuDeck uses, and it's just such a joy to use, to look at and to launch our games from. So for key area 4, let's have a quick look at lower end, or in other words, retro emulation. And guys, pretty much every game for every old system is here, like the Atari computers, Commodore 64, Amiga, Intellivision, the NES, and also the NES Hat, which could be a lot of fun, the Game Boy, Super Nintendo, Virtual Boy, Game Boy Color, the Sega Master System, the Genesis, Mega Drive, Game Gear, Sega CD and more. Let's blast through a couple of these games, and the Atari ST was my first ever system. As I say, every single one of these older systems has pretty much every single game ever released for it, which is crazy. Bomb Jack was one of the first games I ever played. For these super retro systems, we may need to fiddle around a little bit, like I had to press the select button to change to joystick mode. And wow, I haven't played this game in like 30 years, and this is so incredible. It just brings back so many memories. Master of the Universe was a film that shaped my childhood. I never knew an Atari ST game existed for this, which I would have loved as a kid, so it's amazing to discover these games for the very first time. Our great viewer God of War Chuka requested a Coleco Vision game called Gorf, so let's head down the list, and here it is. Well, I've never played this, but it is so cool. I can imagine this being all the rage back in 1983. Let's head into the Genesis console. Let's scroll all the way to FIFA International Soccer that one of our most valued viewers, Michael E. Moore, suggested. Playing this is so great and makes us appreciate just how far soccer games have come in the last 30 years. The infamous Virtual Boy was a system many of us never got a chance to experience, self included. Wario Land is widely considered the best game on this, and I really can't wait to spend quite a bit of time trying to beat this. I was gutted I never owned a Game Boy as a kid for some reason, so I'm super excited to have a good go of games like Super Mario Land. And finally, a look at my favourite retro system, the Super Nintendo. Let's scroll to one of my favourite games, which is Aladdin. Man, this game is so good. If you get one of these emulation accessories, then make sure this is one of the very first games you need to play. This vid could be 3 hours long, showing off even just lower emulation retro games, but let's wrap up with Terranigma as requested by Uzai255. I've never played this and can't wait to try out so many games I've never played before. And now let's check out some higher end emulation. So this has got every single Nintendo 64 game. I love racing games, and Cruising USA is a game I've never played, so definitely going to give this one a spin. It has every single PS1 game, yes, every single one. And Andres Aguilar 723 is a big fan of Final Fantasy Tactics, which is here. All Dreamcast games are here, so if you've never played the awesome Daytona USA, then now's your chance. There is every single Sega Saturn game here. Every single PSP game released is right here. All Nintendo DS games are included. And every single GameCube game is here, which is insane. And one of the very first games you must play, of course, is The Simpsons Hit and Run on the GameCube. It really is one of the most fun games ever. Another must play on the GameCube is Prince of Persia: Sands of Time, which was requested by Throne Room Gaming. This is an absolute classic and definitely worth completing. Every Wii game is here, so almost 900 games. There are over 100 Wii U games, which are these that you can see right here. Almost 500 Nintendo 3DS games are included. And yep, over 200 Switch games. And while I'm all in favour of playing the Switch games that we own on our PC gaming handhelds, I'll be honest that I'm not really a fan of them including all of these here. But then again, maybe they give Nintendo some royalties with the Switch still being a current system, and these games still readily available for people to buy, so who knows. There are 62 Xbox games, so not a massive selection of these. I would have liked to have seen quite a bit more here instead of the Switch games really. Let's load up Blinks, and even though the Xbox emulation isn't the best, this does run pretty great and definitely more than playable. Next are the 114 Xbox 360 games. There are some decent titles here with quite a few key ones missing too, but the ones included are listed right here. I did try loading a few games like Def Jam Icon, but it crashed, as did Burnout Revenge. Maybe it's because in that Windows Install Files folder we need to download DirectX 9, or maybe we need to update the 360 emulator called Xenia perhaps. If you're hot on Xbox 360 emulation, then do let us know in the comments and I'll pin the correct solution. There are a whopping 641 PS2 games. Now I must admit I'm not big into PS2 as I'm more of an old school retro guy when it comes to emulation, but these are here if this is your thing. I did try out the classic that is Max Payne, but the PS2 was the first system in this package I tried where none of the controls on the Ally seemed to work. I tried going into the core type R folder, then emulators, but the PS2 emulator called PCSX2 wasn't here to try and configure the controls in. And configuring the inputs in RetroBat's settings menu and mapping here didn't work either. So if you know how to get the controls working for the PS2 games, then comment below and I'll pin the correct solution. And finally, 172 PS3 games, which are all the ones that you can see right here, so not a huge selection of these and missing some key ones like God of War and Shadow of the Colossus, although it did have 3 Ratchet & Clank games. I did load up what was titled GTA 4 The Complete Edition, which turned out to be San Andreas, but all the controls were working completely fine on this and it looked really great on the Ally's screen. And now let's blast through the top 8 tips for RetroBat. Tip 1 is to quickly exit out of a game, so let's press select and start together at the same time to do this. Tip 2 is to quickly save a game state. So we press select and also the RB button on the top right at the same time and we get this message to confirm it's saved. Tip 3 is to quickly load a game state. So we press select and tap the LB button on the top left at the same time and we get this message to say it is loaded. Tip 4 is to press start to head into the RetroBat menu, then to game settings, then enable this auto save load toggle, so now games will automatically save and load when we enter and exit out of games, which is super handy. Also in the main menu for tip 5 in game settings, head to the retro achievement settings, enable this toggle and enter our username and password if we've created one to get cool PS trophy like retro achievements. Tip 6 is of course it can get overwhelming trekking through game lists, so if we press the X button we can search and type in a keyword, then just the games with this keyword will now appear. Tip 7 is that we can save our favourite games by selecting the game then holding down the Y button. This will then put them at the top of that system's game list. And if we head into the main favourite section, which is where all the systems are, our favourite games will also appear in here too. And finally for tip 8, we can copy ROMs by going into the core type R folder, then collections, then computers, then ROMs, then RetroBat, then ROMs. Here are all of the system folders, so for me it's PSP, then into ROMs. Here are all of the PSP ROMs, so then we can now copy and paste these elsewhere, like onto our SD card or internal SSD. So should you get this? Well, I think if you only dabble a bit in the odd retro game, then this probably isn't for you, and you're better off just finding the specific retro ROMs you want to play. However, I think that there are 3 types of gamers who would absolutely love this emulation accessory. The first is if you're a beginner to emulation, and so finding and configuring all of the ROMs and BIOSes for each system yourself to be really daunting. The second is if you're a massive emulation fan and love retro games. You are super excited to browse through the full landscape of gaming history, with this being a kind of video game museum of sorts, then this is pretty much an essential purchase for you. And finally, third is for gamers who just don't have the time or want to wade through the potentially virus-ravaged websites in order to get all of the ROMs, to configure everything and set everything up, which would literally take tens of hours to do all of this. What's more is that buying a Western Digital 12TB external hard disk off Amazon is around £250 and dollars. So to get this emulation accessory, which is currently just $160 in the winter sale that ends in a few days on January the 8th, is insane value. And with the many hours it will have saved us all to put all of it together, means that I would highly recommend it. And if you like one, then a link to purchase it is below in the description and in the pinned comments. Be sure to like and subscribe if you enjoyed this. Let us know what retro games that you'd love to play if you had one of these. Special thanks to Claire and the great team at KinHank for reaching out and allowing me to test this out. And as a thank you for watching this far, I'd love to share this awesome quote. Never reply when we're angry. Never make a promise when we're happy. Never make a decision when we're sad. Man, it's so easy to make poor decisions and choices when we're in a vulnerable emotional state. So let's make sure that we choose the right time when we're in the right headspace to make important choices, and stay encouraged today, guys. Click here to watch the video that YouTube thinks that you like the best from the channel. I appreciate every single one of you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.